Once again, let me welcome everyone to our webinar on Students as Conservation Catalysts. Today's event is convened by the Conservation Innovation Forum and Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. Our moderator is James Levitt, Director of the Program on Conservation Innovation at the Harvard Forest, Harvard University, and a Fellow at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Jim will be starting us off today.
Very good. Thank you, Jessica. Just again for the listeners, the call-in telephone number is?
It is 610-214-0000, and the access code is 794-821#.
794-821#. All right.
Okay.
Good morning. This is Jim Levitt. I'm talking to you from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm in the offices of the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. I am very pleased to be here today with several guests who are either themselves students or recent graduates of colleges and universities in the United States who are concerned with large landscape conservation or staff and professors who are helping them move along that path. We have some remarkable guests today from Colby College as well as from Colorado College who have actually been engaged in this work for some time and who have appeared to have made a significant difference in at least one public policy issue that we will speak about at greater length soon. But let me just telegraph to you that on November 20th, 2012, there was a historic agreement signed between the United States and Mexico known as Minute 319. A minute is an amendment to a treaty between the United States and Mexico that was signed, I believe, in 1944. And this minute helps to set the framework for the cooperation between the United States and Mexico for the delivery of water across the border into the Colorado River Delta. This agreement is raising very high hopes that we may bring a large part of the Colorado River Delta on the southern side of the border back to aquatic life. And that's just a tremendous, tremendous achievement. So we'll get back to that soon, but I simply wanted to say that at the beginning to say that students can have both modest and very substantial impacts on the course of conservation in the United States and internationally, and we're here to encourage you to do even more. So with that, I will introduce my friend Philip Nyhus, who teaches environmental policy at Colby College. He is an associate professor in the environmental studies program there, and with him is Ginny Kiesler, who is a senior at Colby, working with Philip on a conference that they're going to talk about right now. Philip, are you there?
We're here. Thank you, Jim.
Take the floor.
All right. Well, thanks for that introduction, and thanks for all of you listening. Ginny and I are delighted to be able to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing, and we'll be doing a little bit of a tag team. Ginny was a huge part in organizing the conference and thinking about what this would entail. We are hosting this event next spring right here on the grounds of Colby College in Central Maine, next March 1st. And we see this as an opportunity to bring students, both graduate students and undergraduate students, from around the country and possibly around the world to come together to hear the stories from their peers, to network with professionals, and as Jim mentioned in his email, and as we'll hear from Will and Zach in a little bit, there are tremendously exciting things that students are doing, have done, and have ideas to do around the theme of large landscape conservation, and we're eager to hear those stories and allow folks a chance to network. As background, this idea emerged through the work of the Conservation Catalyst, network that Jim has been centrally involved with, and some of the discussions with a number of folks at colleges, universities, and research institutions around the country and internationally about ways that these types of institutions can serve as catalysts for conservation. As a faculty member at a liberal arts institution, I'm particularly interested in the role of students, and I've seen over the years enormous and interesting and innovative ways that students are involved in a whole host of different activities. We know for those of everybody's been through school or as a student or as a faculty member, a big way that students are involved are in things like research. So whether it's undergraduates or graduate students, here at Colby, for example, we've had for a number of years students contributing in a very significant way in identifying whether and how the endangered South China tiger could be reintroduced into the wild in Asia, and this would be the first large-scale tiger reintroduction project of its kind. Students are involved in very significant ways in extracurricular activities through actual applied work with different organizations. As just one example, Jasmine Yuan Chin graduated last year, did an internship with the Regional Planning Association as part of, developed maps as part of their report that just came out on large landscape conservation in the Northeast. And students are significantly involved in a whole host of activities with federal, state agencies, organizations like the Nature Conservancy, as well as local groups like land trusts. Students are involved, obviously, in the curriculum, and I think this is where a lot of innovations have happened. We heard the story about students being involved in some policies here at Colby a few years ago. Students were involved in helping to pass one of the first laws of its kind in the country, the Kid Safe Product Law, not necessarily dealing with large landscapes, but as an innovative law that happened in part because of student work. Students are involved in things like GIS projects and others. Ginny actually just spent last night talking about large landscape conservation to an audience of over 100 folks from around the state and actually a few from out of the state. And I will turn it over to her, and she can just mention a little bit about one example of a course-based project related to this.
So the Colby College Senior Environmental Policy capstone class has created a report on the state of Maine's environment almost every year since 2004. And past report subtopics have related to large landscape conservation. These include Down East Maine, state parks, and private land conservation. This year's subtopics were large landscape conservation, energy infrastructure, hazardous waste, and voluntary certification programs. The group I'm in, which consists of myself, Garrison Beck, and Laramie Maxwell, has examined large landscape conservation. We have looked at federal, state, and private conservation lands in Maine, and also considered the roles of lands under conservation easement as opposed to lands that have been fee purchased. In Maine, about 55% of conserved lands are privately held, and about 53% are under conservation easement as opposed to having been fee purchased. It's notable that there has been a huge growth in acres under conservation easement in Maine since the early 2000s. We considered the implications of these trends for land management and habitat integrity in Maine, and we also examined the role of Maine within the greater regional conservation context. And Maine really does play a very important role within this context. This map, or the map on this slide, was created by Garrison and displays the conserved lands across New England, state lands in green, private in pink, federal in blue. So a growing number of students participate in hands-on experiential learning through study abroad programs. Here at Colby, for example, about 70% of our students travel abroad, and for many of us, this can be a terrific opportunity to experience and participate in a very meaningful way in real conservation activities. I went to India, and this semester, students at Colby College are in Patagonia and Namibia, working on projects related to large landscape conservation with Round River conservation studies.
So those are examples of more formal ways that students are involved in large landscape conservation, but we know that there are many, many different ways that students are involved in just their creative ideas. And I think this is one of the things we really want to capture in this conference, is to try and tap into those innovative ideas that students have, but might not have a way to share otherwise. I think one terrific example came out of an event that Jim organized a few years ago through the Conservation Finance Forum, the Conservation Capital in the Americas Conference in Chile. And I remember an announcement came out inviting students to produce essays related to this, and one of our students, who was a sophomore at the time, Blair Braverman, wrote an essay on the Iditarod Trail as a model for conservation based on her experiences working with sled dogs in Alaska and living in northern Scandinavia. And this gave her an opportunity to travel down to that conference and to network with other students. And I think that's just the kind of sort of innovative ideas and opportunity that we're hoping to harness at this conference.
Great. So I know that my peers have a lot of really interesting and innovative ideas about conservation, and we're basically just trying to create more ways for students to share their stories and their ideas, and for them to network with each other and with professionals. So for the Conservation Innovation Contest, students are invited to submit essays or creative contributions, such as videos, sort of like what we're going to hear about next. And authors of winning contributions will receive travel awards to attend the conference. One essay will be considered for inclusion in a forthcoming book on large landscape conservation published by the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, and additional essays will be considered for publication in an international conservation journal and other outlets. Students are invited to submit essays or creative contributions that describe one of the three topics: a creative approach to large landscape conservation in which you have participated, a new approach to large landscape conservation that you could imagine pioneering in the next several years, or how the conservation community can demonstrate analytically or in narrative that a large landscape approach is more effective than other conservation approaches in meeting social, ecological, and economic objectives. So, specific guidelines for essays and creative contributions are available online. Essays must include an abstract, and they must be less than 4,000 words or 10 pages. Creative contributions or videos must include abstracts, and videos should not exceed 15 minutes. You can contact Philip for more details. And we would really like to encourage students to participate in the conference, even if they're not awarded travel grants. We're really just trying to generate conversation and networking. And students can attend in person or via web conferencing. Students are invited to submit posters for display and presentation at the conference. We have already received a number of submissions, including one from a graduate student at Yale. And posters will not be considered as part of the Conservation Innovation Contest for students, but will provide an additional opportunity for students to share the work they have done related to large landscape conservation. And all participants, students, faculty, staff, practitioners, and the public will have the opportunity to network and to mix with other participants.
So most of the focus on the conference is going to be on the students, but we also wanted a chance to have some of the real leaders in thinking about this share some of their experiences and give a chance for students to meet some of these. We actually have a longer list. This was an initial list that was put up this summer on the conference website. Our own Jim Levitt is going to be there, as well as Rob Lillahome here at the University of Maine, and Gary Tabor, a number of you may know, will be coming in from Montana. We have a couple of folks coming from the Nature Conservancy, including Mike Tetrodt, who's the Executive Director of the Nature Conservancy in Maine, but who's also done quite a bit with regional large landscape planning in the Northeast and abroad, as well as a few other innovative folks. Margaret Lohman, better known as Canopy Meg, is one of the leaders in the field of tree canopy research and conservation, and she has been involved in things all over the world, won just an enormous number of accolades and awards, and is founder and executive director of the Tree Research Exploration and Education program. So she'll be there, and again, we'll have a whole host of additional people that will be showing up, and we encourage you to look at the website as some of these plans firm up in the coming weeks. Of course, something like this wouldn't be possible without the support of a number of organizations, the Goldfarb Center for Public Affairs and Civic Engagement and the Environmental Studies program at Colby, and importantly, the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy have been big supporters. But we also have partners at over 14 different institutions, a few of them listed here on this slide. If you are interested at all in participating, either in learning more about the event or being a partner, please feel free to send us an email. And of course, we hope as many of you as possible can actually attend. And if you would like to come, we have a registration portal all set up. So with that, I'll leave it there, but I look forward to answering any questions that might come up at the end. Ginny is actually going to be running off to a class, so she may not be able to join us later. But thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Ginny, for your contribution. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that there's a lot of talent on the student side, on the presenter side, a lot of energy going into this. And Philip, I salute you for your leadership and pushing this idea forward. Now,
I'll just mention one last quick piece. We've actually had interest from 19 countries and 39 states.
Wow.
So this has really taken off, and I think it's going to be an absolutely terrific event. So thanks for your help with this, Jim.
Well, the fact that we can do this both in person and virtually over the internet obviously is something that allows us to have this very wide participation, and I'm really looking forward to March 1st. Now, as evidence that there is a great well of creativity and energy in students who are considering being conservation catalysts, I want to introduce a group from Colorado College. I want to acknowledge that we're being alliterative here and only recognizing institutions that start with hard C's, Colby College and Colorado College, but obviously there are many, many more out there. The guests that we have today are all very recent graduates of Colorado College. Brendan Beppel, Will Stauffer-Norris, and Zak Podmore. You can read their bios on the screen in front of you. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brendan, who's going to start the presentation, and then he will turn it over to Will and Zak, the intrepid travelers. Brendan.
Great. Thanks for having us, Jim. Will, Zach, and I are really happy to be part of this broadcast. Pull up some slides here. So the Colorado College State of the Rockies project is now in its 10th year. It's been fostering student activism and leadership in the conservation and natural resources field for nearly a decade. So I'll just speak briefly about the history of Colorado College and thus the Rockies project. Then we'll show a short video of Will and Zach from the Colorado River Delta, and then the two of them will have an opportunity to talk a little bit about their trip and how that's been incorporated into our work. So Colorado College is located in Colorado Springs and has a long history with the American West. Founded in 1874, college actually predates the state by 2 years. The image here shows the college's first official building, constructed in 1880 against the iconic backdrop of Pikes Peak. In the early part of the 20th century, the college actually had its own private forest reserve and its own school of forestry. The school's forest was unfortunately sold during the Great Depression. The School of Forestry laid the groundwork for an intimate relationship between Colorado College and the Rocky Mountain West. Thus, in 2003, the State of the Rockies project was founded. combining the college's long history with the Rocky Mountain West and an ethic of experiential learning. Working under the motto of research, report, engage, the State of the Rockies project aims to connect Colorado College to the greater Rockies region. Our mission reads, building upon over 130 years of service to the region, the Rockies project conducts state-of-the-art research, helping Rockies residents clearly see our communities, our environment, and our economy so we can better shape our future. Traditionally, the Rockies project has focused on the 8-state region you see on the left, what many would consider the Rocky Mountain West. Over the last 2 years, it's been a little different and quite unique that we've shifted our geographic focus to focus solely on the Colorado River Basin, which takes up parts of 7 southwestern states and goes into Mexico as well. At the heart of the Rockies project is student-faculty collaborative research. Some of these images are from our field work from the summer of 2011. Each summer, the Rockies project hires about 5 or 6 different student researchers to investigate the issue that we've chosen for the year. And a key component of that research is getting the students out in the field. So some of these images are actually from the top left is from a meeting we had with the Nevada Water Authority down in Las Vegas. Bottom right, which is a little skewed, but that's from right near the Imperial Dam in Imperial Valley of Southern California. So that provides a really unique opportunity for our students to get out in the field and not just research the issues from a lab or from a classroom, but to actually experience them up close and personal. The end result of each summer's work, or our summer research, is our annual publication, State of the Rockies Report Card. These are our first 8 years of Rockies Report Cards right here. Each year, the students' research is published in this publication, and we release it at our annual conference in the spring. Last April, we released our 2012 State of the Rockies Report Card. This is the Colorado River Basin, Agenda for Use, Restoration, and Sustainability for the Next Generation. And we actually released that in front of a full crowd here on campus, which also included Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar and the Director of the U.S. Geological Survey, Marcia McNutt. Each student gets their own section of the report card, and that's a very unique opportunity for undergrads to be published, and provides as I said, very unique opportunity for Colorado College students. So as part of that title I just mentioned, for the next generation, we've been somewhat shifting or melding traditional aspects of the project with new approaches. While we've continued our usual approach or our usual events, the spring conference and the speaker series, we've also tried to incorporate new aspects to the project that include a greater web presence, particularly focusing on social media. Each of our speaker series events and conference events have been video recorded and produced into sort of shorter pieces and then put up on YouTube. So we're really hoping to reach an audience beyond Colorado Springs and hopefully a younger audience as well that's more and more driven to this new web media rather than traditional media. So it was under this new approach towards kind of engaging a younger audience and things like that, that we teamed up with Will and Zach and really had the opportunity to work with them and highlight their expedition and thus sort of raise awareness about our work here at the college and thus the issues of the Colorado River Basin as well. So it's been a really unique opportunity to get the word out about what's going on here in the West, the State of the Rockies project, and it's been a great chance for us to engage the younger audience and also sort of a different audience that you don't normally consider to be, strict conservationists. We've been sort of meeting with different recreation groups, going into middle schools, going into high schools and things like that, and telling the story about what these guys witnessed from their trip. And it's just been, like I said, a great opportunity to get the word out and pursue conservation through a different avenue. So I think with that, we're going to show a quick video of Will and Zach from down in the Colorado River Delta.
Just give us one moment to bring up the video.
Sure, that'd be great.
I'm Will Stauffer-Norris.
And I'm Zak Podmore, and we just spent the last 4 months paddling the Colorado River from source to sea.
So we're just sitting here at the Morales Dam, where the river pretty much effectively ends. It's this pretty powerful image of one side of the dam, filled up with water, and the other side there's just a trickle coming in.
What's the estuary where it actually
The Colorado River is completely dry from a little ways down from this dam here. And then in places where the groundwater is close enough to the surface, there's a few little remnants of the river. And then the Rio Hardy, which is basically a wastewater runoff stream, joins the Colorado, and so there's a little bit of water in the riverbed. So there actually is a little bit of water where it meets the ocean, but it was not much. It was actually too shallow for us to paddle through. So we ended up slogging through knee-deep mud for hours and hours to reach the ocean.
having just come off of the river, what are some of your top takeaways to really learn on your
When we planned the trip, we didn't really know where the river ended up. We'd spent a lot of time in the wilderness sections of Utah and Colorado, kayaking and rafting. We'd heard that the river didn't reach the sea, but we didn't really realize what that meant until we came here and saw it. And it means that there's hundreds of thousands of acres that once had water flowing through them, and all of that is dry now, except for a select few parts, less than 10% of the original wetlands.
You can really see the difference between these places that have just even a little bit of water, and there's so many birds, and then there's these areas that we hiked through with just mile after mile after mile of tamarisk thickets, which is an invasive species, and that contrast is so striking that even that tiny amount of agricultural wastewater basically can make that big of a difference in restoring the delta.
From your perspective, is it helpful to environmental issues on your journey?
Absolutely. I think any water we can get down here is going to make a huge difference in terms of giving a wide variety of species habitat and really helping to bring the delta back to something closer to what it used to be.
It's definitely the low-hanging fruit in terms of making a big difference. It's worth noting that 90% of the water in the river is diverted before it even hits Morales down here, before it even goes into Mexico. So it's not like the problem starts here at the diversion of Morales Dam. I mean, you guys know that, obviously. It was hard for us to picture what the delta would be like before we came down here, and so I'm sure it's hard for you all in Washington D.C. to picture what it's like out in the Mexican desert. But try and imagine what if the Potomac, somebody just completely diverted every bit of water in the Potomac, and it was just cracked mud flats and filled it with invasive species. How would that be as a place to go recreate in, paddle in, and walk around next to? So if you can just imagine, your local river completely dewatered, how would that have an impact on the local community? And that's exactly what's happening down here in the Delta.
Well, that is a really good comparison. You guys are doing good work, and we appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for taking the time, and we hope that this issue remains at the forefront of all the negotiations that are going on with Mexico right now.
Zach and Will, as I telegraphed at the beginning of this seminar, we have had some progress on minute 319. Can you describe what has happened and what your hopes are for the Delta.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Jim and Brendan, and we're really honored to be here today, alongside all the great work that's going on at Colby College, and especially in the wake of this historic binational agreement between the U.S. and Mexico, which we're really excited about. Basically, what it is the U.S. has agreed to lease a certain amount of water from Mexico for the next 5 years, and together the U.S., Mexico, and a group of NGOs called the Colorado River Trust is agreeing to donate a small amount of water for environmental flows in the Delta region, and that's really exciting, and we think it's going to have a big impact down there based on what we saw on our trip last year. Just want to take a few minutes to put that video clip into context and explain our work with the Rockies project over the last year. In October of 2011, Will and I went to the source of the Green River in the Wind River Mountains of Wyoming, and we got in boats and started following the river. 117 or 1,700 miles later, and 113 days later, we made it to the dried-out Delta region that you saw in the clip there, and the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. But we don't want to give the impression that our whole trip was as difficult as the images displayed in there. And most of the time we were having a good time floating through the wilderness canyons of Colorado, Utah, and Arizona, and enjoying ourselves in our sea kayaks. But the goal of that first trip was largely just to see if we could do the trip. We were longtime boaters, and we wanted to see what it was like to follow a river from source to sea. But by the time we got to the end and saw the Delta, we realized we had an obligation at that point to try and share a little bit of our story with others, and we ended up going back to the source of the Colorado River on a different tributary than we started on the first time. And we really tried to beef up our project a bit. We added 40 interviews with stakeholders in the basin, farmers, ranchers, environmental activists, people working with water in the state of Colorado, and we spent 2 months on the river this summer doing that trip. And we've had a lot of video, photos from that, and we're currently presenting around the country and sharing our project a bit. One of the most exciting things that's happened with the project is we were able to show that video of our conference call with Ann Cassell and other members of the Department of Interior. We were able to share that with the Governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper, the Director of USGS, Marcia McNutt, and Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar. And we're very happy that all of those people have been involved in the recent agreement, and we hope that when they decide to determine how much water is actually going to be given to the Delta region, that it's a significant amount. But the groups we worked with in the Delta area, Environmental Defense Fund and the Sonoran Institute, are very optimistic about this and think it's good news. I'm going to turn it over to Will here, and he's going to talk a little bit more about our project.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the more novel aspects of our project. So you wouldn't really think of a long kayak trip as being conservation at first glance, but what we're really trying to do is give people an opportunity to follow along with our trips and kind of see things from our perspective and provide that personal narrative that is sometimes lacking. If you just looked at a report or a map or something, just data doesn't give the same story as you would give as, if you're trying to portage around a dam and they call the sheriffs on you, which happened to us this summer, having those kind of experiences or paddling all the way across Lake Powell, those kind of personal narrative, bringing those kind of personal narratives to this conservation work. And hopefully that you saw that a little bit in the Delta video, and I think it was a pretty powerful thing to have the Governor of Colorado and the Secretary of Interior sitting in this theater and watching us struggle across the Delta, and hopefully that provides a more human aspect to the conservation work. And I think making these films too, that's the way that people are consuming media. At least a lot of young people is watching short films on the internet. So that's what we're creating, this new video series, and we've also created a 10-part web series from
our Source to Sea trip, so that people can watch maybe a 5-minute clip of the Colorado and follow along with our journey that way. Yeah, you have more questions for us?
Let me start the questions. Let me also invite all the people in the seminar with us who have been listening to this really fascinating story to submit your questions, and then I will read them both to the guys from the State of the Rockies project as well as the team from Colby College. So any questions that you have for any of our panelists today, please submit them on the right-hand edge of the screen that you see, and I will ask them of our panelists. But let me start by asking Will and Zak, now that you are graduated from Colorado College and have completed a great deal of your work on this Source to Sea adventure, posted your YouTube videos, what do you think this lays a foundation for in your careers going forward? I'm not asking you what your next job is going to be, but where are you headed? Will and Zak, are you there? That's a tough question. But
yeah, I'm asking myself that question every day. But I think what these projects have really taught me is that you can combine all these things that you love. So, you know, Zak and I originally started this trip because we wanted to do a really long river trip, and we did that. But along the way, we realized we had this obligation to conserve these places that we love and really become advocates for the river. And so I think we're really trying to figure out how to balance going on these long trips, going to these amazing places, sharing these stories with as many people as possible in order to protect those places. And so I think trying to figure out how to do that and communicate effectively, and especially I'm doing film, Zak's doing writing, trying to figure out how to communicate that effectively and just share the stories with as many people as possible.
Great. Now, I know I'm still waiting for some questions to come in from the field, and I know there's some people out there who thought they might have some questions for you today. Again, let me invite the attendees to the seminar to either submit questions for these guys or submit ideas that you might have for ways that students can act as conservation catalysts that I can present to the panel, to Philip, to Brendan, to Will, to Zak, to consider. Philip, are you still online?
I am.
Let me ask you, like I did just of these guys, where have you seen some of the students that you've taught at Colby College go on to make their mark in landscape conservation?
Well, I love the story about the video because I think it's just those types of creative ideas that actually are the most interesting stories. I have one student right now who's traveling around the world with the Watson Fellowship, going to 13 different countries, and she's looking at the role of large transboundary river systems through the eyes of local communities and iconic endangered fish on 3 different continents. And I think it's that kind of storytelling narrative that is actually going to capture people's attention, like Brendan, Will, and Zak mentioned, that I think reports provide one type of information, but these types of stories and blogs and pictures can provide another. I have another student who has won a number of national awards for her writing and been published already in several influential journals. She's in a graduate program at the Iowa Writers Workshop, one of the top writing programs in the country. And she struggled between doing something more analytical and more GIS-based. Her father does more kind of statistical stuff as a professor in Oregon. But she realized her creative passion was through writing and through essays. And that's how I think she's going to really end up changing the world. So we have students doing a lot of things, and I think it's those experiences that they have that can really give students additional ideas. I mentioned that Ginny was presenting last night, and actually we had some alumni from past talks in the audience, and they're off doing things like working for regional and national NGOs on large landscape conservation. So there's so many ways that students are involved. One of the reasons we're excited about this conference is I think it'll be a terrific way to actually capture and harness some of that energy and see what happens from it.
Great. We have a question now from Melanie Parker. And again, I know a number of you who are online, and I encourage you to challenge these guys. Melanie Parker writes the following: "Cool stuff, everyone. For the conference organizers, my own experience shows that local organizations that engage diverse stakeholders are key to the success of large landscape conservation. I am wondering if, in addition to universities, large NGOs, and government agencies, you have considered including stories about how students learn from and participate in these local and regional collaborations, and therefore gain an appreciation for local landowners and various constituent groups." Philip, I think that we'll start with you, and then I'll go to Brendan.
Yep. Melanie, that's a terrific comment, and I absolutely agree. And we actually have, especially in a place like Maine, where we have a lot of these types of small organizations, small community groups, and small networks, for the last several years, my students and I have been involved in working with lake watershed associations and land trusts in a connected 7-lake system, just around the kinds of ideas that you're talking about. And what's incredibly positive about that experience is it really is a win-win situation where the students are gaining real-world example both during the summer as well as during the school year, working on questions that are of interest to these local groups. So the students are gaining a lot, but they're also able to contribute in a very meaningful way with some of the activities of these other organizations. So yes, I think we need to share those stories. I think that will be something that I hope we'll be able to share more at the event, and I hope we'll have a number of people there who can talk more about that.
Brendan, let me direct the same question to you. Has Colorado College had any success getting their students involved in land conservation efforts right in the Pikes Peak area or in southern Colorado, where Secretary Salazar, who is a graduate of Colorado College, comes from?
Yeah, we've actually had a couple of different experiences from this past summer where we really tried to focus on, well, last year, I'll just preface it, last year we focused on, the whole Colorado River Basin, which is, almost this incredibly difficult task to try and address the whole basin. And so this past summer, as part of our research with my student researchers, I encouraged them to scale it back a little bit, and we actually focused a lot on Colorado's Front Range, which, while not in the Colorado River Basin, consumes Colorado River water. It's actually pumped up over out of the Colorado River Basin and either dumped into the Arkansas River or into the South Platte River in the case of Denver. So one of our student groups from this summer was focusing on municipal and industrial use of water. So it was a great opportunity for them. They actually went to different utility providers on the Front Range, Fort Collins, Denver, Aurora, Parker, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo, and actually met with officials there to see what each of these different utility providers is using to conserve water. And in this case, conserving water on the Front Range means keeping water in the Colorado River. So that was, one instance where we looked at sort of regional water use and water conservation. Will and Zak sort of mentioned their trip from this summer, where they went from the headwaters in Rocky Mountain National Park down to Lake Powell, really sort of to set their sights on more of on what they call the upper Colorado River Basin this summer as well, to just try and address that area. So we've definitely been trying to take it. We want to keep the whole watershed and the whole river basin, the big picture in mind. We realize that it's best in some instances, to start on a regional level. And here we are in Colorado. Why not, address water conservation here in the state, which, as Colorado is the headwater state, will address, water availability and in-stream flows downriver. So yeah, that's definitely, we've been trying to pursue that as well.
And I have two questions lined up regarding the Colorado. One from Megan Chapman, and I think Will and Zach, you might be best to answer this one. While the river and its water are the main issues, how do we get all stakeholders to understand that land use issues are closely tied to water issues, and without land use change, the water issues will not go away? Will and Zach, as experts who have been interacting with communities up and down the river for a couple of years now, what do you think about that?
Yeah, this is something that became really apparent to us over the course of our trip, was just how connected the 30 million people who rely on Colorado River water in the Southwest are through both the land issues and water issues associated with this limited resource. And 80% of the water in the Colorado River right now, diverted from the Colorado River, is used for agriculture. And as the population continues to grow in cities between Denver and Phoenix, Tucson, San Diego, and LA, and precipitation starts to go down with climate change, there's really the only thing they can do to provide water to the growing population is either increase conservation efforts or to kind of dry up agriculture. So that's really controversial right now in Colorado, at least, is as suburbs are expanding in Denver, say, there's farms on the Front Range and on the western slope of Colorado that are having their water rights bought out, and kind of the historic way of life in Colorado is shifting. And that's largely due not to just the fact that they need the land to develop, but because they need the water used for agriculture to supply water to these new subdivisions.
I think another part of that question too is how do we get all the stakeholders to understand these issues across the entire basin? And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is get people, say, in Colorado to see issues down in the Delta that normally they wouldn't think about. A lot of people on the Front Range of Colorado have no idea that the Colorado River ends up down in Mexico, first of all, and then that it runs dry as well. And so when we were down in the Delta last winter, we were talking to one of the key environmental organizations that helped negotiate the new agreement between the U.S. and Mexico. They're called the Sonoran Institute. And we asked them, we said, we're going back to Colorado right now. What should we tell the people up in Colorado that have no idea what's going on in the Delta? I said, tell them to send more water down. And, that's a pretty obvious thing, but people don't think about it very much in Colorado. And so I think that's one of the main things that we're trying to do with our project is to get people to look at the Colorado River as a whole basin and think about different sections of the river that are actually all interconnected by that Colorado River water.
All right, so Rob Gatewood has another question, which is very well informed, and it shows that people are listening to these conservation innovation webinars in series. He asks, a recent conservation innovation webinar dealt with the Cienega de Santa Clara and the great effort underway to ensure Colorado River flow for this important ecosystem. Did you intersect with any of those involved on the ground during your voyage, sometimes slog down the river? And I want to particularly ask you, did you interact with any of the Spanish-speaking peoples on the Mexican side of the border and make this actually an international expedition? Did you have a chance to sit down with them and talk to them and understand not just the U.S. NGO's perspective on this, but the perspective from the side of Mexico?
Yeah, we received a lot of help on our journey from the Sonoran Institute, which is doing restoration work in the Delta region. kind of combined with the Environmental Defense Fund and a Mexican group called Pro Natura, and they're working on large restoration projects where they're taking out invasive species and planting the native cottonwoods and willows. They're also working on buying up water rights in the U.S. and Mexico, which they're putting into a water trust and will eventually donate to flows in the Delta. In the Cienega in particular, they do a lot of work there, monitoring species and restoration work. And then just from the actual people we met along the way, we spent 5 days in canals traveling across the Delta region in these little tiny rafts that you saw in the video. And we met a lot of people. There were roads on either side of the canal the entire time. People were always stopping and asking what we were doing. Though our Spanish was pretty limited, we got the sense that there also is a disconnect from the people living right along the dry riverbed in Mexico just as much as people living in Colorado thinking about where their water is going. And when we tried to explain that we spent the last 3 months floating down the river and exploring the river in the U.S., they didn't really understand that. They kind of said, how could you float down the Colorado River? It's dry. There's no water in it. And that was pretty shocking to see the people who are living there in this region not really understand that the river didn't look like that for the whole course of the river.
And Jim, this is Brendan. Might add from the rest of the Rockies project perspective. We actually took some of our students down there during the summer of 2011 to the Cienega de Santa Clara and met with Pro Natura, the Mexican environmental organization that Will and Zach worked with. And we had a really incredible opportunity to go down there and tour the Cienega, and we highlighted it in our annual publication as a perfect example of how even the smallest amount of water can make a huge difference down in the Delta region. For those that don't know, the Cienega is mainly the only water they are provided with is agricultural runoff for really brackish groundwater from the Welton Mohawk district in southern Arizona. And the work that Pro Natura and Hosa in particular down there has been really crucial in bringing some of this water to the larger Delta region. They've been doing research there for almost a decade, more than a decade now. And that's been a really great source of information so that people realize that just the smallest amount of water will make a huge difference down in the Delta region.
Great. All right, I have 2 more questions, and I think we're just about out of time. One comes from Tom Mortensen, who I believe is from Minnesota, and he has a fairly long statement and question, which is that in addition to local groups, government, and NGOs, in some cases, individuals can also lead efforts. For example, in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, one woman led the community with the help of students in the 64-acre parcel of northwest Minnesota hardwood forests. I guess in protecting a 64-acre parcel of northwest Minnesota hardwood forests. Natural contours are now restored. Handicapped accessible paths lead nearly a half-mile through the woods and 4-year-old seeded prairie to a 110-seat amphitheater. Sounds like a great project. Designated trout stream, Sucker Creek, marks the South Preserve boundary. Unimproved Janet Bowe Memorial Trail leads to the creek's marsh walk, a second issue in the battle against aquatic invasive species. Again, local residents have been in the forefront of this effort. My question is, how can we encourage individuals, students and other individuals, to recognize a problem and to take the lead in solving it? Philip, that's a big question. It's a very relevant question. Let me ask you to take a cut at that first, and then I'll turn it over to the team from Colorado College.
All right, I'll take a quick cut. I totally agree. I think a lot of the most exciting things that happen in the world come from individuals, whether they are affiliated with organizations or are doing things on their own. And I think the fact that all of us here together are part of this and thinking about Jim's role is testament to that. Let me just get 3 student examples and then sort of a quick answer. Here locally, we had a couple students a few years ago who recognized the need for cooperative. We now have one of the first municipal cooperative food stores in the country that emerged out of student work. Another student raised $175,000 through a federal grant. We now have something called the Mid-Maine Sustain Coalition that's catalyzing energy conservation in central Maine. Another student, when Plum Creek Timber purchased 900,000 acres of land here in Maine, on her own went out and brought together both representatives of that company and a major statewide NGO and a packed audience of a debate between those. And you know, I think these examples, we all know terrific examples of individuals, whether they're older or younger, and I think the question isn't how can we encourage them. I think a lot of people have problems that they've seen. It's how do we empower them. And I think one of the things with students is to encourage them to realize they can make a huge difference if we can facilitate their work, or getting out to meet with people who have problems that need solving. So I think it's a great comment, and I think it's an important one.
Brendan or Zach or Will, do you have any ideas on inspiring individuals?
Sure. This is Brendan again. So we've had pretty unique opportunity just in the last few months to sort of travel around, both here in Colorado, meeting with, these guys met with anyone from a second grade class all the way up to, the Colorado Watershed Assembly Conference. And that's been a bit of the expedition and the Rockies project goal over the last year is to really engage individuals, take it right down to a personal level and try and show people, either here in Colorado Springs, you turn your tap on, and that's water that's not flowing downstream. So, I mean, while it's not a grand, plan and, large conservation approach, we've really been trying to engage individuals and have them really think about how their water use and energy use, land use, things like that, affect the Colorado River. Even though you might be all the way out here in Denver's Front Range and Colorado Springs, it's affecting water use, 1,700 miles away, and we're really trying to engage that individual. And we've seen really great successes from that. People coming up to us after events, asking what they can do, how they can get involved. People have been reaching out to us from a lot of different institutions of higher education. How we can utilize how they can utilize some of our work to raise awareness in their communities. So we have been seeing some really great responses from individuals, and really trying to join us in our work on trying to conserve water for the Colorado River. So, yeah.
Great. I'm gonna close with a short story, and also thank all of you for participating. Brendan, Will, Zach, Ginny, Philip, you're all individuals who have taken initiative and reached very high levels in communicating with them to really make a difference. So I hope that you all serve as models for the students that we're encouraging to submit stories to this March 1st conference at Colby College, so that we can keep this snowball getting bigger and bigger. The story I want to tell is about Thomas Jefferson. When Jefferson was an older man in the 18 teens, I think it was about 1817 or 1818, he was both in financial straits and needed new sources of revenue to help support his lifestyle and his family. And someone wrote him and asked him whether or not he would be interested in selling a piece of property that he owned himself called the Natural Bridge, which is in the Blue Ridge of Virginia, and which is an extraordinarily beautiful and remarkable place. I believe that he was offered a considerable sum of money for it. Jefferson wrote this individual back and said thank you for your offer, but I can't sell Natural Bridge because I consider it to some extent a public trust. That is, he was taking land which he held in his own account for the benefit of himself and his family, I suppose. He understood that that individual holding was part of the greater Commonwealth and that he should protect it for future generations. That land is still intact today. It is still owned by a private interest in the Blue Ridge in Virginia, and a beautiful place to visit. So this individual action can have repercussions that ring down through the ages, almost 200 years after they're taken. So the question, of course, is who are the future Thomas Jeffersons who are among the student population today who we can inspire to get involved? We look forward to having many submissions to this Colby Conference that will be held in March of this coming year, and I want to thank all of you for joining us on this seminar. We will be back talking to you again in the first quarter of 2013. So with that, let me wish you all very happy holidays and productive work in the field of kayaks.